There it goes. Boom.
Hello, everyone. This is The Rabbit Hole, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
That's right.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for coming on, Rabbit. I appreciate you popping out of your hole for us. If you're watching, the Rabbit Hole maintains privacy, and so we're not going to include his live or camera image, but it'll be me. Hey, everybody. So you get a chance to see me the whole time today, but the Rabbit Hole is for sure here in the studio. It's just we're only going to hear audio only. So that's a new thing with StreamYard. They used to just put an icon up there. They're not doing that now. So we're just going to maintain anonymity and go forward. The one thing I will say about having the Rabbit Hole on is these conversations aren't supposed to be comfortable. The Rabbit Hole does a great job of looking at who we are, how we behave, what we think, what we do, what's really going on. And there's always contrary opinions and ways to do this about it. It's their fault and everything else. But these conversations are founded in like this real data here, this real numbers. And so even if it's uncomfortable, we got to hear it so we can have a better understanding of who we are, where we're going. And I think that's a fair way to characterize anybody's approach to this thing. The Rabbit Hole is particularly successful and fantastic communicator with a lot of these things. So thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate you. Appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you all can enjoy the Rabbit Holes again. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, and of course, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat, and I think this is my third time on the show. It's always been a pleasure, so I'm glad that we're still doing this.
Yeah, no, it is. It's fun to have you on. I look forward to it. And I think we space it out nicely so that it's not just the same kind of thing. Uh, before we ever start, when we kind of committed to this, Charlie Kirk was alive, and there was no thoughts of him ever dying. And now he's been assassinated. And I'm using the word assassination because it appears to be a political killing, which to me is an assassination. But what are your thoughts? Is that too rough? Was this a murder? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think assassination is a fair way to characterize it, right? Like I've been calling this Luigi leftism, um, but I don't know how accurate it is to refer to the entire left as a bunch of Luigis, right? Like I think what we have here is there's probably there's two figures in this stage scenario. So like you have the Luigis, the people who are actually killing people, right? Like in this case, it was this Robinson kid who shot and murdered Charlie Kirk. And then there's also like the Taylor Lorenzes, the Lorenz leftists, who kind of see the Luigis of the world do their thing, and then while they're not actively participating in these political assassinations, they're kind of celebrating them, and they're not really treating human life with the respect that it deserves, right? I mean, because the thing is, it's like there's a lot of people I've seen, who kind of preemptively say like, oh, I didn't like Charlie Kirk, but it sucks that he died. But like, I don't think we need to qualify it sucks that he died with anything, right? Like, it should just be, oh, it sucks that we lost a human life. It sucks that someone was literally just navigating the discourse, going to college campuses, trying to have conversations, and for that he lost his life. And we can, people can make whatever excuses they want for it. They can say that he was hateful. They can say that he was racist. They can make whatever excuse they want for it. And my thing is this: it's mean words are not an excuse nor a justification for someone to lose their life. Like, we have to prioritize things properly, right? And life does come first. Like, violence will always be worse than mean words on the internet, mean words in person, whatever. So like, I think we have the situation where we have a political left that has treated words as violence for a long time. They've kind of conflated the two concepts, and this is kind of the inevitable end logic of that thought process. And I think for the left to kind of save itself, it has to kind of delineate between the two. It needs to separate between words and separate between violence, and understand that words are just words, and violence is not an appropriate response to that, to any words that someone might say.
I know we've heard, and I mean, so many times so and so's Hitler, and it's like, come on. And I used to say, talk to me about Hitler's rise to the Reichschancellery. What? What? Again, that was like where it stopped. And that's all it ever did, right? It just stopped there. But it bothered me that people would continue to say this thing. And the more it was said, the more it became normalized to act like these are Nazis, this is Hitler. And we get a lot of this. And I'm not saying from the left, the right has their talking points too. But I'd like to say that we're 22-0 with all of the existential crises that have faced us, and we've gone by them, right? We love to throw these hyperbolic terms out there, and to cast everybody as history's heel, Hitler and Nazis and everything else. But there is a value to that if it does move the conversation and normalizes. I would never call someone Hitler. What a terrible thing to call someone. And they might be my adversary, but do I think they want to round up 6 million Jews and kill them? Oh my God, like, no, of course not, right? So why do we I don't know. I don't normally take people seriously when they say these things. I'm like, oh, okay, you're just saying a hyperbolic thing, but it does seem like it's possible that has led to violence, and the okay of the diminishment of people, the amount of jewelry we see in the press is off the charts. Like we should be past this stuff, but we're not.
Yeah, and I think on the internet, like, there's this thing called Godwin's law, right? Like, where the longer a discussion is going, the more likely someone is to bring up a Nazi comparison, a la Hitler, right? And
Right.
I think these comparisons are increasingly dangerous because I don't remember the exact numbers, but like I think this was 5-10 years ago now, maybe. Like, I remember seeing this discourse around would you punch a Nazi or would you punch Hitler, and it's like, well, even though like those specific cases are very fringe and they are probably worthy of contempt, like, we have to be careful about addressing ideas and words with violence, right? Because it can spill over into people who do not deserve it, right? And as we've seen in our discourse, Godwin's law, like, people who are not anywhere close to Nazis, anywhere close to Hitler, they're being called these things. That certainly happened to Charlie Kirk. It's happened to people on the left as well. Like I was watching a YouTuber Shoe on Head the other day, and like she had like a list of things that she's been called, I think it was a fascist for, right? And it was
Right.
many of these things were innocuous, like, and I don't know. I think we have to be very careful about Nazi comparisons, about Hitler comparisons, and because if we're not careful, like, it's going to get to a point where where people are going to label their political opposition Hitler or Nazis in the hopes that some radical will pick up a gun and do the dirty work for them and taking them off stage. So like in other words, like, we don't want to create a dynamic where Lorenz leftists call someone Hitler in the hope that a Luigi leftist will pick up the gun and take out their pseudo Hitler.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who are on the left, and I'm not a right person either. I'm in the middle. So sometimes I'm left, sometimes I right and move around. But I know a lot of people who are left of me who don't condone political violence, don't particularly care for the Hitler narratives and these kind of, the fascists. They're like, I don't know any fascists. That's like that. That's not what I want. I want to solve these other problems. And it does seem like this is, I don't know. I don't want to be an old man here, but the social media is partly to blame in that we want to get these burns in on people, and instead of ameliorating problems, we're rushing to stoke our egos and get a dopamine hit. And I mean, these sites and these services are designed to do that to us. And it doesn't seem that we are the better for having social media when it comes to people like Charlie Kirk getting murdered.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where everything has trade-offs, right? Like, social media has been great in terms of democratizing the discourse. Like, people like me wouldn't have a voice or any influence if it
Right.
wasn't for these new advancements, right? But on the flip side, it's created a situation where some bad influences are able to exploit the new dynamic and raise themselves up, and it does also create risk, right? Like, it's also a situation where let's say someone with like 10 followers, they might say something thinking that they're just screaming to the void on X, and then
Mm.
for whatever reason the algorithm picks it up and the tweet gets blasted to an entire mega audience, right?
Right.
Suddenly this private individual with a very small following, they're being faced with a level of criticism that used to be reserved for elites, like big celebrities in Hollywood, for example, who are used to large audiences, right? But now that same level of scrutiny is being applied to someone smaller. And I think we also need to keep in mind, this sort of dynamic shift, like where we used to reserve these large scale critiques for large scale people, but now these large scale critiques are being are sometimes being used to target smaller people, and that's not necessarily sustainable or healthy, because the big guy has the means and resources to bounce back from it, but the little guy might not, right? And it's also, and going back to the social media thing, like, I also think shutting everybody inside, it was certainly a factor, right? Like,
Yeah.
there was this discourse over the last week over leaked messages between Charlie Kirk shooter and their trans partner, and people were saying, there were many people saying that, oh, this sounds like a script. Like, they compared it to that scene in Breaking Bad, where like the jig is up there, law enforcement is about to catch Walter White, and his wife and his family are in the crosshairs, and he stages a phone call with his wife to basically acting like, oh, she was coerced and forced into the business, and just kind of giving her an alibi, right? So some people have tried to frame the shooter's messages with their trans roommate partner in a similar light, like, oh, this was staged to give the trans roommate, the partner, an alibi. But I've also seen this other argument. I think this came from the account Reddit Lies, where they kind of pointed out that, oh, these are also like, this kid seems to have been radicalized by social media, or at least social media played some factor in it, right? That's been a theory that's been floating around. And what he said is that there's many people on Reddit, who talk in very weird ways that kind of resemble the communication patterns we saw in those messages. So I'm not, we can only speculate. Like, there's no way to really know for sure, at least at this point, which it was. But it could just be that they were giving an alibi. But I also think it's worth considering, what's happening to our youth, and whether these social media circles, like, or the way they're using social media, is turning them into these people who don't know how to communicate properly and into weirdos, and in the worst of cases, radicalizing them into violence. And like I said, I think COVID was a big factor in this, because it used to be like, you would have this crazy radical idea, and you would go outside, touch grass, talk to real people, and realize, what, we're all human. There's no, it's not right to, to kill someone, right? Versus during COVID, a lot of these kids, they were shutting their doors. They did not have a lot of human interaction, and all they had was Reddit. All they had was TikTok and these social media algorithms. And it's very different seeing a profile picture versus a moving human face. And that's just comparing a still photo to a moving video, right? And then there's a higher magnitude of difference between a moving video and a live person, shaking their hand, interacting with them in face to face. So I think shutting our kids inside during COVID was one of the worst things that we could have done. And I think we're going to be seeing the ramifications of that for a long time. And I wouldn't be surprised if in this current situation, like, that was a factor in this kid's radicalization.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we put someone in their solitary cell for 5 months, granted, prison's not the same thing as a house, but if you've never been to prison and you were locked into your house for 5, 6, 8 months or whatever, and we terrified people with the diseases and images and everything else, yeah, to think that there's some psychosis from that's left, that seems like a reasonable thing to me. I mean, if we had a psychologist here, be like, hey, would it be a good idea to lock a bunch of kids up and not let them see each other, and force them to interact online? Would that be good for their development? I imagine the answer would be no. It seems kind of obvious. And you're right, that ability to touch grass, to go and commune with others, and just have a hard conversation, but don't start off with "you're an idiot" and then be unmovable in that position where the person you're talking to, you diminish. You can't allow them to grow or learn. Like, let's say that you were going to convince me of something today, like, because I'm glad to learn. Um, I have to be where I am so that I'm capable of taking that next step forward. Like, if you're going to say, "Hey, political violence has done this, this, and this," and here's, oh wow, I didn't realize, right? But you have to be able to be movable, and that means you got to be somewhere proximate to that person's position, because it's really hard to get someone to move from an extreme to the fence to even consider about getting over the fence or straddling it. That's a really tough conversation, and I think you don't have to even consider it if you're on social media. You can just completely lock in and shut your eyes, close your ears, and just scream at someone.
Yeah, and I also think, like, like some of the things that these kids have been through, like, these used to be punishments reserved for the worst of the worst in society. Like, like, I'm gonna, like, slight tangent, but, like, but one of the drugs that's given to transgender youth, or people going through transgender therapy, is Lupron. That used to be a drug used for chemical castration, like, of sex
Right.
offenders, right? And we're just giving this to kids now. Like, so there's also this question of, like, why are we treating kids as badly as we treat sex offenders, right? Why are, and then also, I think you kind of alluded to, like, solitary confinement being something that we used to do to prisoners. It's like, that's what we did to our kids during COVID. Like, we put these people, and these regular people who've done no wrong, certainly they haven't done as wrong as people in prison, these kids into solitary confinement. And that used to be a punishment meant for criminals, and they were in solitary confinement for a long period of time. And to think that it's not going to have any ramifications, I think, I just really think that when the health establishment decided to do that, implement these policies, they didn't weigh the trade-offs properly. And I think the long-term ramifications are worse than anything COVID could have done to us as a society. Like, in other words, like, the response to COVID, in my opinion, was worse than COVID itself. I think, I think especially because, like, we poisoned our youth, in many ways. So, and because they're the youth, they'll be taking over the country one day and running it. And and so this is a demographic that's gonna be with the U.S. for a long time. And I don't think we were fair to them at all.
I'm going to put a link up here for this study that Robin Dreek and I talked about the other day on the show, and it comes from the center. Think about the name of this organization. They are the Network Contagion Center. So the NCRI, so National Contagion. What does it say? Network Contagion Research Institute. Network contagions, everybody. And
Oh,
so,
is that
and they talk, it's assassination culture, how burning Teslas and killing billionaires became a meme aesthetic for political violence. This is an actual university paper. This is not some kind of crazy, group or something. And these folks are studying our network lives and the contagions that are in. The fact that we need that kind of studying capacity is already crazy.
No, yeah, and I mean, I think I'm familiar with the study. So, like, and Charlie Kirk posted about this, back in April before his passing or before he got assassinated, and he was saying that assassination culture is spreading on the left, and I think he has a point. Like, I mean, what else can you call it when 48.6% of people, nearly half the left, thinks that it's justified for Elon Musk to be murdered? What else can you call it when a majority of the left, 55%, think that it's justifiable for Donald Trump to be murdered? 57% who think it's acceptable for acts of vigilantism that destroy Tesla dealerships. I mean, this is going beyond mere words and internet disagreements and mean words. Like this is actual; these are actual physical, violent, vandalist, responses that are being rationalized by people on the left. And granted, it's one study, but there's also this YouGov poll that came out after the Charlie Kirk assassination, or at least I saw it after the Charlie Kirk assassination. So and it just shows that violence is more accepted. It's more accepted and more often justified on the left. So like, so I'll read one category from it. It's like
Mhm.
25% of people who are very liberal think yes, violence can sometimes be justified, as opposed to 3% who are very conservative. And that's an 8x difference. Like and specifically, it's the people most likely to rationalize violence or some sort of physical response are people who are specifically liberal and people who are young. And I think when you combine the two, it's we're seeing something very dangerous emerge.
Is there a similar pattern with a different topic where the right is more prone to violence? Whatever stand your ground laws. Like, are the right doing more of that and engaging in some kind of extra normal violent behavior because of their political bent?
Yeah, I mean, I think the typical example that comes up is January 6th, right? Like, obviously, like that
Mm,
was bad for many reasons, and it's been talked about to death on legacy media. But even in regards to January 6th, I always think like, okay, yes, this was bad. Like, I'm not trying to excuse anything that happened on January 6th, but
right.
I think at the end of the day, like the wider context of that year is we had one riot on January 6th versus 500 plus riots during the summer of love with BLM. And it's not just a matter of committing violence as well, right? Like, because I think the group of people who are willing to commit violence is very small. I think earlier on in the show, like, you pointed out that most people on the left probably wouldn't commit violence, and like I do think
Right.
that's generally true, right? Like, I have friends on the left and they wouldn't, and I think they're very appalled by what's happening with Charlie Kirk. Like, but I think what is very concerning is this thing that we're seeing on the left where even if even if a leftist isn't a Luigi, they're a Taylor Lorenz, where we're fine, they're not willing to pick up a gun and shoot someone, but they are willing to fawn over the Luigis. They're willing to fawn over the people who do commit these acts of violence and kind of celebrate the murders and kind of rationalize them, right? Like, there's been many cases that I've seen on social media where someone said something along the lines of, "Oh, Charlie Kirk was a bad person, therefore he deserved it," and that's not right. Like, no, just I can't reiterate this enough, but mean words do not necessitate a violent response. Like, we have to act like a civilized society and tackle words with words.
Yeah. It's always been a thing that people take to certain criminal causes. I mean, it's just so many times where someone's incarcerated, maybe for the rest of their life, and they've got love letters. Charles Manson had love letters. All these different time. Is this the norm? Like, if you have a guy who, I mean, Ted Bundy, right? Like, people were infatuated by him partly because he was a good-looking dude, kind of looked a little bit like Luigi Mangione. And so, is this a human condition where some group of people are going to be, look, sure, he's taking on the man and he shoots this guy, to, shoots him in the back like a coward, but still, I can understand he's fighting back. It's too much, but wow, I love that he fought back or something. I can wrap my head around that. But I think a lot of this is just that infatuation that some people have with someone who's a cause celeb, even if it's a criminal cause.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a factor. Like, people meme on women's smut novels and how some women, perceive their ideal romance, right? And oftentimes like it's some 50 Shades of Grey, borderline abusive guy that they're dreaming about being with, right? And I think it's also another factor is just the fact that a majority of young liberal women have some mental illness. So when you kind of like combine that tendency or that tendency some women might have towards being attracted to like men with dark triad traits, I think is the term for it, like these these antisocial tendencies, with the fact that many of them have a mental illness, along with the fact that many of them are on some kind of medication, birth control, SSRIs, antidepressants, where it's a cocktail for disaster, right? Like you could, I think a society could have like maybe one or two of these things, but I think when large swaths of the population are engaging in all three, we're seeing something concerning emerge.
When someone like Charlie Kirk goes out and says, "Hey, prove me wrong," sits under a canopy on a university campus, they know there's going to be some contention. I'm not a Charlie Kirk purveyor. I've seen some of his videos, but it wasn't my thing, so I kind of just passed on to. I'd rather see old timey boxing videos, frankly. But what's his responsibility to speak? And like, he's obviously a great communicator, right? It doesn't mean he's always right. It doesn't mean that he says the thing in the way that it needs to be said. How much tolerance do we need to give him, and how much tightness does he need in his performance? What does he owe us, and what did we owe him in terms of, hey, listen, he's going to make some mistakes?
I think in terms of like what any speaker owes the audience is just like a degree of like respect and cordiality. Like, and I think Charlie, from at least from the video that I've seen of him, like he tended to show that. And I think from an audience, like it's just a matter of responding adequately, right? Like we don't respond to words with violence, like we respond to words with words, right? And
Right.
I think the dynamic that exists right now between the left and really many non-left wing speakers is that the left gives disproportionate weight to words, and they
Mm,
respond with disproportionate heavy-handedness, right?
mm,
Like I saw another poll from Fire, and it was something like, I think over 70% of people on the left or college students think that it's okay to shout down a campus speaker, right? If and it just goes back to, if we do not have room in this country to have civil discourse, like I'm worried about what's going to take its place, right? Because the way
right.
that I see it is that for a long time humanity settled disputes through physical warfare, right? And then we had this civilized age emerge where we decided, you know what, let's use words as a proxy for physical warfare. Let's instead of killing each other, let's talk things through. Um, so like I'm very concerned about what's going to happen and what the next steps are. Like in the process, if we give up civilized discourse. And I think for someone like Charlie Kirk, like whose entire shtick was free speech and going to college campuses and just uh, having these conversations, if someone like that is getting shot at, like it's very bad for our culture, and it's very bad for our national soul, because um, there's many people who are taking Charlie Kirk's shooting very personally, because to them
Right.
it's like, well, I from their perspective, Charlie Kirk was moderate. Like, he wasn't severely right wing. You know, so I think they're thinking, oh well, if Charlie Kirk was getting shot at, and I don't think that differently from him, then maybe we're also in danger of getting shot at, and the only thing separating us from getting shot at is magnitudes of influence, right? I'm not saying that's the best way to think about it, but it's I also can't blame people for thinking that way. When a guy who is known for free speech and having conversations is getting murdered, and I think the nature of his murder is also a factor here. Because it was people found out almost instantly all over social media. Like, he got shot, and then within the hour, I think, videos of the shooting came out. Like, and there was like one that was more from further away, and then there was another one that was close distance. And it's and I think I think most people are good people, and when they see something like that happen, like it does hit them. Like, when you see someone close up getting their neck blown out by a bullet, and then you find out, oh, his wife and kids were in the audience. It's like, I think that does touch a part of our souls. It
Yeah.
does, it does kind of provoke us to feel sympathy for a guy. And because I think at some base level, like, we still hold American values. Like, many of us still want to believe in the First Amendment, right to free speech and discourse, and we understand at like some base level that, okay, this was not the right way to respond to words. This was deeply corrosive to our national soul, and we should do whatever we got to do to get us back to a place where we can have conversations. And kind of just going back to the original question, like, I think speakers should always do what they can to be civil with their audiences, and also keep in mind the speakers have the microphone, so like it's easier for them to talk over someone in the audience, right? Like, it's that dynamic that comedians have with crowd works, for example. Like,
Sure.
but on the flip side, though, there's also an audience duty to the speaker. Like, we shouldn't be having a culture where it's acceptable to shout over someone you disagree with, and we especially shouldn't have a culture where it's acceptable to shoot someone or respond violently to someone you disagree with. Like, and just distilling it back to the core theme of this talk which is we have to respond to words with words. Like, violence is just not the right way to do it.
Yeah. We also, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I've learned a few things along the way. I'm 55 years old. And when this happens, it's not time for me to raise to an opinion that I'm not unwilling to change. And I don't know who did it, why they did it. And so I'm not going to decide, oh, it was a black guy, or, oh, it was this, I'm just going to wait and let the authorities do their job, because they're pretty damn good at it. Do they catch everybody? No, but chances are they're going to catch this guy. And we were so desperate to get on our little part of the platform, we being all of us, and start barking about it on social media. And that even still, like when we get these bits of video, it's like, oh, maybe it was this and this and this, and just all these wild guesses that are just unattached from reality. And when we start to get the information and it starts to come in, and we still don't know very much, and these things take time. We're so desperate to have the answer and to know it and to be omniscient that I think it tears at um, our desire. Like, this is like the chemical thing, like Christmas, right? Like, I just got to know what I got for Christmas, or just wait until Christmas, and you'll open the package, and then even then we still probably going to disagree with what actually happened. But you can show someone a video with all the evidence in the world, and it's not enough. It's going to be some other thing, and for whatever reason, we can't allow reality to be reality. Maybe that's for a lot of reasons, but I've noticed this, and I want to dovetail this in here too. I was asking about the speaker's responsibility and the audience, the greater audience's responsibility to allow that person to be fallible, to make mistakes, to grow and learn something. We got to allow that. But I watched that Jimmy Kimmel video, and I'm like, look, it's not a surprise he took a certain point of view. It's his job, and he's carved out a lot of the audience that he doesn't want to watch his show. And so that puts you in peril of being fired. Do I want the federal government firing that guy? Do I want them creating influence? Not particularly, but also if you're going to measure these two guys, Charlie Kirk had a bigger audience than Jimmy Kimmel, and his was growing and Kimmel's was shrinking. This is not a political statement. It's just how their careers were trending at that time. We struggle with this. We struggle with the fact that someone like Kimmel said something and his career couldn't afford it. There's business deals to sell the entire network. And instead of drawing more people in and being more valuable, he has spent the last 20 years making a smaller and smaller and smaller audience. As we've all moved away, like you mentioned earlier, like, you are a viable platform. I think I'm a viable platform. So all of that goes into this milieu of what does the speaker owe? What did Jimmy Kimmel owe us? And if you're going to get things wrong like that and be political, well, gosh, Jay Leno wouldn't do that, and Jay Leno did really well in that job. So I don't know. What are your thoughts in general on that? Just kind of soup of stuff I brought up.
What was the last thing you said? It cut out for a
I
moment.
was saying that if you're going to run a late night talk show, Jay Leno you didn't have to know which way, and I don't think anybody knows which way Jay Leno votes, or Johnny Carson. These guys just said, hey, this is an American show. We're going to talk about American things. And they did political commentary, but it wasn't from one's point of view. So as we look at all this stuff, I don't mind Jimmy Kimmel losing his job because he lost his audience, or lost enough that it was no longer valuable to have him around, especially when there's a deal to sell the network, especially when there's other networks that have to sell your brand to make money. I don't mind that exchange, but I don't want the federal government being involved. I was kind of reverse tying those things back in.
Gotcha. No, I think I'm tracking now. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like you said. Like I'm also in a place where I would just prefer to let the free market, the free market of ideas just kind of do its job. Like I would prefer that the government not intervene in these things. I'm hearing mixed things about whether the FCC was or was not involved. Based on what I've seen, it seems like they did play some role in like nudging it. Though I'm not sure if what they did was outside the jurisdiction of the FCC, right? So like I think there's a conversation to be had on whether we should have the FCC at all. Like personally, like I take the stance that the less government we have involved in free speech and discourse, the better. Like I think it's very scary when we had the federal government colluding with old Twitter, for example, to censor certain voices that they like, right, that they may or may not like, right? But on the flip side, it's also not I also don't think society has a responsibility to subsidize people whose time has come, right? So like if people do not like Jimmy Kimmel's show and that's the reason that he's canceled, then the network also has responsibilities and to keep the lights on, right? So like if it was like a free market situation and people just didn't like a show anymore, and this was just the excuse they needed to can him, then I think that's an easier pill for me to swallow. But I think the reason that people are debating this is largely because of what they see, what they perceive to be government influence on his firing, with the FCC doing whatever it did, right? And I think. And I think like kind of the topic of whether we know how certain late night shows vote, right? My thing is like even if you want to be like a Jimmy Kimmel and create propaganda that benefits your side, it should at least be good. I think when Stephen Colbert did that really cringy performance with the vaccine, right? Like it's obvious what he was doing. Like that's not like my thing is like even if that's something that they view as desirable and like they should go for it, if they want to create propaganda, it's like at least be good at it. And I don't think that they were, because people have been mocking these guys, these late night shows for years now, and outside of their gradually shrinking audience, I don't think many people take them seriously. What I've found to be in bad taste is this sort of a response from the left, like where now they're acting like free speech champions, right? And it's like okay, like where were you guys when old Twitter was censoring most of the country? And it wasn't even just the conservative half. Like we're talking about like normal people, like who are more moderate, and their crime was something like oh, they didn't want to go along with gender pronouns or transing kids. Like people like that were getting banned on Twitter. There were people getting banned for sharing FBI statistics on crime data. Like governments, like this is data straight from the government that they were getting censored for on old Twitter. And not only did the left fail to speak up, they often actively encouraged it. And I mean, I have this list of quotes here. So like, so for example, like, so I'm just gonna go down this thing that I had. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech. That's from Tim Walz. From Hillary Clinton, if they do not moderate the content, we lose total control. From AOC, we're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. From John Kerry, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to hammer disinformation out of existence. From Kamala Harris, they are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation, and that has to stop. So, like just knowing, and this is all from like the last like few years, like maybe 5 years, right? And hearing these people, who were previously talking about restricting and censoring people over misinformation and hate speech, it's to pretend to care about it now that is someone on their side, Jimmy Kimmel. It's like, what are you guys doing? If Jimmy Kimmel was a conservative, they'd be cheering on his censorship. They would be, because Jimmy Kimmel, from my understanding, did spread misinformation about the nature of the shooter. So that certainly falls within their standards of what warrants censorship. So I mean, it's so to me, it's just very gross that these people are now trying to act like free speech champions when this is the standard that they created, and it's very frustrating in that regard, because I would prefer that we don't do this whole cancellation thing. I would prefer that we not censor people, but but it's also at an emotional level, like it's very frustrating, and it grinds my gears to see people who created the standard now trying to walk away from it. It's like, well, this is your idea. Like, you should have condemned this, like, when it was your side in power, when you guys were doing it, and now you're only speaking up because because the tables have turned. Like, you thought you were living at the end of history and your side was going to hold power forever, and
Sure.
now that there's a different government in power, now that the culture is turning in a different direction, now you're speaking up about this. And it's also, in my opinion, like, gross that they care more about Jimmy Kimmel than Charlie Kirk, who literally lost his life a week ago. Like, I was, someone made this point, like, Barack Obama tweeted more about Jimmy Kimmel than he did about Charlie Kirk, and I think, well, priorities are off. Like, this is a situation where one person lost his life and one person lost his show. Like, sure, maybe Jimmy Kimmel was a victim of cancel culture, but he can still wake up tomorrow and go say whatever nonsense he wants to say online. He has millions of followers across his social medias. He still has an audience. Charlie Kirk can't do that. I hope he's resting in peace, but he doesn't have that option anymore. He lost his life. Yeah, and I honestly do think a big reason he lost his life was because the left created a standard of words of equating words with violence, and slowly over time, like, we kind of went down the slippery slope of, words are violent, therefore it's okay to respond to violent words with violent actions.
I'm not much of a fan of President Obama or President Bush, either of them. I just kind of don't care for like the top dog, and I don't know that they're reliably capable of delivering what they say. But it does seem to me that if Barack Obama is the leader of the Democratic Party, or one of them, we do need to see some leadership from him. And you're right. I don't track a lot of his stuff. It leaks into my feed every now and then, and I haven't seen anyone. I don't know. I would behave in a different way if I had that responsibility, and I would never get that job. So here I am running my mouth about a bunch of bullshit. But yeah, how do you send a message to folks? Clearly the left is good at messaging because they all come out and say the same things. They use the same vernacular, same words, and I think that's partly self-selection that they select in because they're comfortable in more of a community, as opposed to like Republicans who seem to be kind of scattered and not wanting to do the same kind of things. So maybe this is just part of what Democrats are. But gosh, I would like to see, yeah, I'd like to see some united front. You know, Heck, how about all the living presidents? Not President Trump, but well, I guess Joe Biden wouldn't be able to do this, but um, President Obama and President Bush just standing there and saying, "Hey, political violence isn't the thing. We get to speak. We can tolerate speech." This is one of the times when like we can tolerate way more than I think we are, and I can tolerate. Like I don't have to agree with you with everything, but I can certainly tolerate your opinion. And even if I disagree, you are both reasonable and rational. And even though your name is the rabbit, it's like this little rabbit is reasonable and rational. Even if I disagree, I can understand why you come from there. There are times when the left, I don't understand where they're coming from. And this is one of those times where I would like to see some leadership. And so I can be proud of my own internal left leanings, but also my friends who are part of this party, instead of seeing a party of people that are, well, they're running out of words. And that's a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think the left really does need to take accountability for like this culture that it created, because a big reason why cancel culture got to the point that it did is because there was collusion between the left and
Right.
old Twitter and social media platforms to censor their political opponents. There was and then the left also kind of enabled like the most radical fringes of their base to kind of steer the politicians by the cuff. And even going back to like those quotes that I read out, like these are leaders of the Democratic Party. Like Tim Walz was the candidate for vice president. Hillary
Yeah.
Clinton she ran against Trump in 2016 as the Democratic candidate for president.
Right.
AOC is arguably one of the top people, or the main Democrats in Congress, and some people are thinking she's going to run for president soon. John Kerry was a presidential candidate. Kamala Harris was vice president to Joe Biden, and she ran for president this last election. Like these aren't small people from the
Right.
Democratic Party advocating for censorship and clamping down on free speech. These are major figures, and I think they, and I honestly, I do want to see them take accountability. I do want them to say, like,
Yeah.
what, maybe some things that we pushed, even if we had the best of intentions, it didn't, the outcomes weren't what we thought they were going to be. And I think they should backpedal on it, because like these standards that they created, they're not even sustainable for themselves. Like right now, like
Right.
all these people misinformation, they're whining about Jimmy Kimmel and losing his job over him spreading misinformation. And it's like, well, this is your standard. You're just mad that it's being applied to you now.
Right.
And it's also like I don't know who wanted this. It's like, I think
Yeah.
as far as most Americans go, like most Americans are are mature enough and willing to have these conversations and just talk about difficult subjects. So like, I don't know why we have a political coalition that's trying to nanny everyone and kind of
Yeah.
shepherd us like we're like we're not ready for this one. I think Americans are capable of having these talks.
Is this even really a problem? Like, that's always a good question to start. Can we even define the problem here? I don't want to act like Charlie Kirk's death wasn't a tragedy, but so often we hyper focus on something that it just falls within the realm of chaos. I'm not saying that this isn't a chaotic thing or is chaotic, but is this really a problem? Do we really have a problem with tolerating political speech in this country?
Yeah, I mean, and I think when it comes to political speech, like,
Hmm.
even if we don't want to tolerate it, like, we at least have to get to a point where we understand, like, okay, words are not violence. It's not acceptable to physically attack someone. It's not acceptable to shout someone down. Also, real quick, I think earlier I cited a statistic from Fire. I think I said something
Hmm.
like 70% of leftists think that it's okay to shout down a speaker. I think on here it says that it's 72% of students. So it doesn't specify that they're from
Okay.
the left. I think it's just 72% of students in college think that it's
Fair
okay.
enough.
Just
Good
reading,
correction. Yeah.
which is kind of scarier because like because that kind of indicates like, oh, this isn't this is like a broader thing than just leftist students, just students in general in college, and this is the younger generation. So I think if this is the future of speech, I think we're heading in a very scary direction. And then
Yeah.
the same study from Fire, it shows that acceptance of violence, 34% of students say using violence to stop someone from speaking on campus is acceptable, at least in rare cases. Yep. And then, oh yeah, and that's I think the NCRI study. Charlie
Yeah.
Kirk spoke about it too, regarding assassination culture. Yeah, and I mean, I think if it is a problem, like like obviously, like there's always something better that can be done from all sides that are engaging in the discourse. That said, the way I see it, like it's been one side, and it's just a subsection of one side, which is not just the left, it's the radical left specifically that's been pushing,
Mhm.
for these for these draconian speech norms. And that's the side that we need to focus on pushing back on. And I mean, it's also for their own good, like because like I found a study from Skeptic. It's like the young leftists and
Mhm.
or Gen Z and millennial liberals, they're the most likely to sever ties with family and friends over political differences. And it's like, and when I see stuff like this, I'm like, dude, like,
Yeah.
that's your family. Those are your actual loved ones. Like, why are you ending friendships and relationships with people who you love over a disagreement on politics? It's like that doesn't. I don't think that's healthy. Like, I think that's how people get
Right.
isolated from their families, from their loved ones, and they're more prone to being groomed into radical ideologies. And that's also not something that we want. Like, I think people do need to just go out, touch grass, and realize, okay, we're all human. Let's figure this thing out together, and
Yeah.
let's not ruin everything we have over these disagreements. Because I think let's not give these words so much weight that we're ending our friendships, we're ending our family relations over politics.
Yeah, are Donald Trump's actions vindictive, or is he guiding us towards a better future? Is it both? I mean, it is fair to say that some of the stuff he's doing appears to be vindictive, right? And that can be spun in that way legitimately. And I'm saying spin, but there are problems with his impetuousness and his desire to I don't know. He is not a good unifying leader when it comes to these kind of things. That's my impression. I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm also not a Barack fan. I'm not. So, what are your thoughts? Like, how does President Trump help us with this without making it? And listen, when you're the president, the best thing you're going to do is make things worse. How does he reliably tamp down some of this tension? What does he need to do? Because he's the boss right now. It's his responsibility to cool the cauldron.
So this is kind of deviating from the Charlie Kirk discourse, but
First,
but we kind of saw echoes of this earlier this year when that kid at the track meet was stabbed, right? I think it was Austin Metcalf,
yeah,
and
right,
then his killer was able to fundraise like $500,000, I think, roughly, in legal funds from GoFundMe or whatever the site that he used to fundraise was. And then we had the more recent and also very very disturbing, because we saw the video, which was Irina Zarutska getting stabbed on that public transit. so and I mean and there's a lot to be said about the racial dynamics here. But I think one thing that we do need to be very adamant about is just having sane crime policy, and not, and because interracial crime happens, crime happens in the backdrop of soft on crime laws, right? When you, Irina's murderer, this was a guy who's been in and out of prison for years. I think he had around 15 arrests, prison visits,
Right.
Along those lines. And there's another stat, where the vast bulk of crime can be prevented if we just jail people after 3. So that 3 strikes thing, there's some merit to that argument. And also when interracial crimes happen, and there's always gonna be a group of people who try to focus on the racial dynamics of it. And
Yes.
And when people see a physical situation where someone of one race is attacking someone of another race, that's going to generate some discord. We saw that with BLM and George Floyd in 2020, and we're seeing that now with these more recent cases. We can debate the nuances of that. Right now, I'm more trying to make an observation about how people respond when they see an interracial conflict, right? And kind of zooming out a little bit more. And kind of entering the realm of college admission, there's this situation where people are starting to realize that, oh, we have these affirmative action programs that benefit that benefit some races at the expense of others. So I think one thing that President Trump has done really well is directly taking on the universities and trying to end these race preference programs, because I think, and I think if he succeeds, it's not far-fetched to call him the best president for civil rights in the last 30 to 50 years, because many presidents had an opportunity to take on the universities and end affirmative action and really make sure that this stuff is stamped out. And from my perspective, he's doing what he can to address that, because we have a situation in the United States where society is multiracial. And there's a strong risk of people becoming overly tribal and sticking to their own. And I'm not sure if that's what we want as a country. I think we should more take that melting pot approach where everyone who's here, they contribute what they can, and then we all kind of come together. But when you have programs like affirmative action that benefit one race group, that benefit some races and punish others, I think that takes away from that. So I think tackling these things is very important to do in terms of fostering national unity between different types of groups. I think some things that President Trump says could be worded better.
Sure.
That said, I think because Trump is going after sacred cows like affirmative action, things that the left thought was untouchable, or at least it seems to me that they thought it was untouchable. I don't think there's much President Trump can do to improve how he's perceived among certain sects of the population.
Sure.
I don't think he could talk exactly like Barack Obama's talks, in terms of mannerisms, tone, inflection, right? But because of what he's doing is undermining the left's equity project, their DEI project. I think they would find a way to demonize him no matter what. I mean, even using someone like Charlie Kirk as an example, I thought Charlie Kirk spoke more politely than Trump does, and and this was still someone that they painted as a fascist and a racist, and there's many people on the left who thinks for that, what happened to him was warranted, and obviously it wasn't. And then there was a case where this is somewhat hitting on our northern neighbor Canada, but there was Jordan Peterson, who faced a lot of criticism for his skepticism of the transgender stuff, and the risk that it posed with compelled speech in Canada. And Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, was even more tame than Charlie Kirk was. So I mean, it's already we've gone a couple levels down, right? And even someone as calm and tame as Jordan Peterson received so much criticism and was painted as evil by a large portion of the left. So I think there's legitimate point to be made about how President Trump handles some things, but I think the larger problem is simply that we have a side in politics who uses their media institutions as proxies to slander their political opposition to a very extreme degree over what should be minor disagreements. These people, and it's a situation where the two sides are so polarized that if the right says, "Oh, men can't become women," the left will push back and very stubbornly die on the hill that no, men can become women, and it's obviously nonsense to the sane perspective, but that's how polarized we are right now, where something as basic as biology is a cause for polarization and disagreement.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the left in this case, when they get so obsessed about the 10,000s of a population, that could be that's what look, there are scientific studies. Stanford, good enough school for you, for medical, and they're like, certain kind of chemical makeups in utero and everything can influence the perceptions of sexuality. It's not just dysphoria because you're confused and have a mental illness. Like, you might be built improperly in utero, but we know what this number is, and it's 1 in 10,000, and it's hard to deal with those folks. It's hard to keep them happy and alive because they're made in this way that's hard to sustain. And rather than deal with that small problem like a small problem, we've turned it into a cultural movement so that we get well outside of that 1 in 10,000 barrier. And this is part of this psychosis that we're all getting, whether it's inflamed by COVID or social media. We just are making these wildly uh, unsustainable decisions about things, and it's crazy. I wanted to back up for a second, because I want to say about Jimmy Kimmel. I know people that know Jimmy Kimmel personally, and they swear by the guy. He's a great guy, super generous, takes care of people, full of love. I've heard the exact same thing to the people that I know. Charlie Kirk, they have his number in there. They've got text from him, and they're like, same thing. Like, this is a wonderful person who bent over backwards to help us when he didn't have to, and he made something happen that we couldn't have done. This is a wonderful person. So we have this reality. This is that touch grass thing. We're like, hey, you know what? I bet Jimmy Kimmel and Charlie Kirk could have sat down and had a wonderful dinner together. Because they both have that capability. They're both engaging, talking persons. But we tend to want to pigeonhole people into one little spot, and like, I don't think Charlie Kirk I don't know a single fascist out there. No one's ever asked me to join a fascist party. It's not a thing, but we have this inability to have subtlety in our political rhetoric. And so we come up with these outlandish things. Donald Trump's not an autocrat. I mean, he's going to do what he wants to do. That's the job. He's the boss, but he's not a dictator. And I know people get to believe that. That's fine. But at some point, you have to look around and be like, he's the courts, or he's dealing with the courts. He's doing these things. I don't know. I just don't understand why we're driving ourselves crazy on some of these things, because it just seems to be just a bunch of screaming and clucking, as opposed to let's just get to work. Let's go out and ameliorate small problems and turn them into less big problems.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make, because it's like, for the average person, like, solving a macro issue like government dysfunction, for example, like, that's not really doable.
Sure.
For the average, like the average person is not going to magically wake up in the president's seat and work on
right
these large scale reforms, right? But the average person is going to wake up in bed at their home, and if the room is messy, they can clean the room. If the dishes have to be done, they can clean their dishes, right? But I think like focusing on like what's within immediate control is healthy for most people, and
Mhm.
and I think politics, for whatever reason, has become like too central to the core of many Americans, like pastimes, right? And I think people need to find like other things that kind of keep them grounded um, and to occupy their minds, because I think constantly being focused on politics and like on problems of a political nature is the healthiest thing, because I mean, even someone like Elon Musk, like, this is I think the most accomplished entrepreneur of our era. Like, even he went into the government. He tried to do that thing with Doge, and it was hard. Like, I mean, they ran into a lot of they ran into like a lot of like roadblocks, and it's looking like it's going to take longer than they expected. I they still accomplished a good amount, but
Right.
it also but it was still hard for them, and that's Elon Musk, right? And the average person isn't Elon Musk. So I think for the average person, like we just got to focus on what's within our control, and problems of a political nature, they're very hard to solve, even for the Elons of the world. So I think for the average person, like, it might not be the healthiest use of their time or mental energy. Like, it doesn't hurt to be aware, but I also don't think it's healthy for it to be this all-consuming thing that I think it's becoming for many people.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah. Boy, you're right about that. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, that was it. Um,
Okay. Let me say this then about that, because this is a good lesson for all of us. We had all this passion, all this capability that Elon Musk put in there, and then look at the cost. They came after his businesses. Tesla stock tanked, and here's a guy who's trying to help us do something about global climate change, right? And so we have this conundrum where, like, this guy's hyper successful and everything, but the cost of fucking with the government machine was so high. He's like, this isn't worth doing. I got to go do something else, and find some other way to make a difference. And thankfully he did, and he's great. And Tesla stock is zooming up, and they're innovating like they always do. And SpaceX is going great. Like, that's the stuff that we want Elon Musk doing. But the government stuff, man, that machine is so, like, they can just ignore you. Yeah, come on in. We're not changing anything, and then just wait you out because it's such a it's like this leviathan that you can, like, poke it with a stick and be like, you have to move, and it's like, or not. I'm not going to change. And so it's the classic example of something that briefs well, but when you get to the ground truth, good luck, because that's not what happens around here. We're not changing this. We're not going to save this money. And the amount of chaos you create to make 1% of change in any system is often, like, canceled out by the chaos, right? Like, to make a system 2% every year for 2 years, 20 years, make it 2% more efficient is almost impossible, because it just gets harder and harder and harder. And now you have this machine that's not a system, it's a collection of systems and microcosms of society. Oh my gosh, there's, like, no way to really reliably go in and fix it. It sort of just is what it is, I think. But maybe there's someone else who can go out and do it. But if Elon Musk couldn't figure it out, and if it was costing him all this time and effort and he wasn't getting anywhere, I don't want him focused on that. I want him focused on, you know, going to Mars.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to tie Elon onto the other conversation we had about how leftists paint their political opponents. Like, we're talking about Elon, who was the electric car guy, which is a very left wing coded industry to be in with Tesla, right?
Sure. Yeah.
This is the guy who's trying to take us to the moon, to Mars, to make us a multi-planet species. This is the guy who is trying um, to restore. Who's trying to restore liberty to the disabled with Neuralink. Like,
Right.
I saw the video of the chess of the disabled guy who can now play chess with his brain, and these are, like, he's doing things that are life changing for so many people.
Right.
And they try to paint him as a Nazi, and and he was, and, like, over what, like, a arm gesture that people on the left themselves have made. Like, and
Oh my gosh. Who takes
we
anything
see,
seriously? Yeah, I mean, come
yeah,
on. That's just, yeah.
yeah, and this is and it's scary because it's like, they painted him as this villain, and then polls came out, and you see, like, oh, most people think it's okay to vandalize Teslas now. Most people think it would be justified if Elon was murdered, and that's not acceptable to me in society. Like, you can't,
Yeah.
like, uh, you know, like, the thing is, like, with free speech, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like, like, it's not. I don't think it's morally right to paint someone as a fascist, as a Nazi, when they aren't. And
Right.
then, because it does have an impact on public perception. And with Elon, like, he's had a lot of success. I think he's had success in politics. Like, his biggest endeavor was getting Trump elected, and he succeeded in that. And I think he'll continue being involved in other ways, and hopefully he has success in those endeavors too. But even in the private industry, he's had a lot of success. Like,
Yeah.
I just listed out a few of examples with SpaceX and Neuralink and Tesla. But there's also X, AI, and X.com, his social media endeavors, and X, his social media, is a good example of how you can have an impact on politics while still being focused in the private sector.
Sure.
I think his purchase of Twitter and rebranding it to X was the single biggest factor in reshaping the political climate and re-electing Trump.
Yeah.
Because what he unleashed by doing that, by lifting some of the censorship on the site, like, it opened up a lot of room for discourse that wasn't there before. And I think a lot of that discourse, benefited some people. And even and in my case, like, I made an X account because I heard that he was going to buy the site, and I was like, oh well, old Twitter would have censored me because, like, I know the stuff I want to talk about. Um,
Right.
but I'm going to try building something on here, and hopefully Elon's platform will be more lenient. And luckily it was. And I'm grateful for that. Like, I think when you let people speak their minds, it's very important. Like, like
Yeah.
some little guys might find their voice, and it gives Americans a place and room to talk things out.
Yeah, this is not a big ask from you, but I'm going to use you as an example. You obscure your identity in part because there's a lot of mean people out there that are vindictive, and you're not a bad person. I mean, I don't know you personally, but every time we've talked, you seem like a rational person, and I would never want anybody to harm you based upon our interactions, right? And when you look through your feed, you're not pointing your finger and saying these are evil people. You're not doing that. So this whole thing where even you can't safely um, make yourself known because there's all these costs that have nothing to do with the person that you are. And you're right, like a lot of us love to cast things at people. I would say they cast evil. And so they'll say, oh, you're a homophobe. Okay, am I? I don't think so. Yeah, I'm not. I never have been. Not going to be. Sorry. I'm not an Islamophobe. I'm not a this phobe or that phobe. I know the phobias I have. And my doctor might know the phobia, but nobody else that just asked me, are you an Islamophobe? No, I love Islamic people. How could I be afraid of them if I love them? I got all kinds of friends who teach me so much about Islam and the values of it, right? But it's easy to cast that on somebody else, and you're a fascist. Oh no, sorry. Let's clear the air here. I'm not, and that's never enough because it's a performance. It's an emotional thing. It's not an actual statement. In fact, someone is trying to get an emotional response from you. I don't know how you deal with that. Like if all of a sudden 1,000 people decide you're a fascist and they point at you everywhere you go and you're a fascist, like I'm not. Stop saying that. It's like we're not obeying the rules of the marketplace of ideas to just come back and say the same thing repeatedly over and over again about somebody. You're Hitler. I'm not Hitler. I'm a nice guy. I do nice things for people. That's a broken part of our system. And I think we're all too willing to call someone an idiot, to ignore and diminish people who maybe are thinking deeply about an issue and maybe warrant some more of our attention and more of our patience. And even if they're wrong, you can't get them to where they're right by ignoring them, diminishing them, mocking them. And anybody who thinks they're right about everything, let me tell you something, you're not. So I don't know why we have this desperate need to diminish people and to marginalize them, to get them fired. I mean, I don't want people, I don't want, look, you shouldn't express your dumb opinions online too much anyhow. And I'm going to go do this in 5 minutes, but um, it's crazy that there's so much cost just simply existing because of these stupid social networks that we think we all need to belong to.
Yeah, no, I think in regards to like, getting people fired, like I very much sympathize with that because it wasn't that long ago, like the left was getting people on the right fired, and now
Yeah,
I'm going to see like some early stage inversions of that. And I will say this though, like I do think the stuff that the left was getting people fired over was more mundane than what the right is doing currently, right? Like because
mm,
right now we're seeing people get fired for largely for mocking and disrespecting someone who died, right? Like and making
yeah,
light of murder, right? And I think for a society, like just as a culture, like if we're gonna glorify political violence, especially if someone whose entire shtick was free speech and discourse, it's gonna have a chilling effect on discourse. Like people are gonna be more afraid to speak their minds, right? So
sure.
that's one impact of it, and then and also like I think it's just more messed up to like to mock someone's death than question gender pronouns or to cite FBI data, right? Like
Right.
um, I still have concerns about this dynamic that we have
Mm, yeah,
where a regular person is being um, faced with a level of response that used to be reserved for large figures like celebrities, right? Like kind of going back to the
yeah,
beginning of our
right.
conversation. But but like I think if we've moved from canceling people over pronouns to canceling people over murder, that's at least a step in the right direction because like if we're gonna cancel people, like it should at least be for something serious, right? And then hopefully in the long run, like we can arrive in a place where we have like a more nuanced approach where we understand like okay, maybe this thing the person said wasn't right and it was gross, but they also have their own problems and responsibilities, and just kind of extend that grace and like understanding, because like I mean if every person who said something stupid on the internet gets fired, we're gonna have like a society of like unemployed people, just permanently
Yeah,
relying on the state, and that's also not something that I think we should want, because it's almost guaranteed that every single person in America and the world has said something stupid, um,
Oh, yeah,
that would get them fired by some side, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying everything is equivalent. Like I do think it's worse to mock murder than it is to question pronouns. But the point that I'm trying to make is we should be very careful about this dynamic of trying to ruin people's livelihoods over words on the internet.
Right. Yeah. And to what end, right? Like, what is that? What does that accomplish? And by the way, um, don't opt in to putting your career on the line by saying something ridiculous about somebody you don't know and have never interacted with in your life. Just bite your tongue. Bite your tongue. Be like, yeah, I purposely didn't talk about Charlie Kirk at all because I have very little opinion. It is regrettable that he is dead. It is a tragedy. I don't have emotions for that. I had a good, a decent, at least decent, if not good friend of mine drop dead yesterday. And the next person that dies will be the next person, and there'll be another person. People die all the time. It's unfortunate that he was murdered. It's unfortunate that Irina was murdered. These things shouldn't happen, but that is how many times a day throughout America. People are going to always get murdered, and we have a lot of passion. And this is like where our media influence comes in. I don't know what the racial makeup needs to be, but there is a formula where they're going to show certain murders. There are all kinds of people that get murdered for all kinds of reasons, but we lock onto a few of these things, and a lot of that is people trying to sell Cadillacs and get better rates for ads because if it bleeds, it leads. We know that, and so you see this tragic death on a hunk of light rail. Is it because of a black guy and a white chick? Is it because of bad criminal policy? What about that dude who got shot by another dude in Chicago that night that we don't even think about? We don't even know about. We don't even care about. We don't even care to know about. I don't know. I'm conflicted about how much any one particular murder matters. This case, Charlie Kirk had a big following, and there's a bit of a difference there. But right now, someone got murdered right now, and we're not going to know about it. It's not going to make the news, and it was just as needless and stupid. But
Yeah,
the media influences this stuff a lot.
no, definitely. And I'm sorry for your loss, by the way. I hope both you and
Oh,
the
it's okay. I mean, people die, and he was a good dude, and I'm 55, so people drop dead when you're 55, and so that's not to minimize his death. It's obviously a tragedy, but yeah, I mean, like someone else be the next person in line right now. Like they had someone die today, and so like that murder train, that death train, just keeps moving, and not to belittle Boone's life because Boone was an incredible guy, but yeah, thanks for saying that. But it's just at some point you just say, hey, people die, and I have to figure out how to deal with that, and I'm not going to invest all. I don't have any emotions left to invest in someone like Charlie Kirk or Arena. I mean, it's tragic, and I hate it, and I don't want to watch it. I don't want to ever see anybody die ever again. I've seen too much of that. But you know, what am I going to do about it? I got to be a good me. And you and I have exchanged on this and I'm going to let you go here in a sec. But I'm the biggest influencer in my life. I'm the person who decides what matters the most. And if I'm a good person and I exchange well with other people, then I'm going to be a value add to my community. I can't. It doesn't matter to me if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump is president. They don't know me. They don't care about me. I don't care about them. They're irrelevant. I mean, for the most part, is that a little bit inaccurate? Okay, fine. But the bottom line is I am the biggest agent of change in my life. And if I want someone else to behave in a certain way, then I better have the respect to them to give them the same courtesy of how, the golden rule. And if I just golden rule myself towards a better life, then I'm going to be part of the solution, not the problem. And I don't know any other way to do that.
I think that's a good way to put it. Like, it just goes back to the central idea of I think it's better to focus on what's within your immediate control, right? Like,
Yeah,
like I don't have any say over what someone in, let's say Ireland is doing, but I have a bit more control over my local community, and I have full control over
sure.
myself.
Yeah,
Or, and kind of just going back to an earlier point that you made, like about being careful about what you say about people online. Like, I think I think one thing that helps um, is to focus more on like certain issues rather than individuals, right? Like, I don't think like it might be healthier to critique the idea of hate speech or misinformation than calling Kamala Harris a name, right?
right.
That because I think people have more fans than ideas do. So if you go after an idea, like, I think there's more room to discuss with someone than if you go after their favorite politician or person, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and and on these recent murders, like I think, you know, even there, like there are certain ideas that can be discussed very productively, like, you know, with Irina's tragedy, like, you know, we can discuss why we let people out
Right.
of why we let people with like 10 plus arrests walk around freely. It's like, okay,
Right.
at what point do we determine, okay, you've been on the wrong side of the law too many times, we should just put you away forever, or, you know,
Right.
or future capital punishment. What
Yeah.
and we can discuss the ethics of capital punishment, but I mean, but at the very least, I think we need to like figure out like what our line of the sand is for putting someone away forever, like life in prison,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah.
and then with Charlie, like, you know, there's the wider issue of assassination culture
Yeah.
and what that means for free speech, right? So I think, um, you know, I think a lot of times like these individual cases, they end up being proxies for wider discussions. You know, that said, like you know, for long term impact, I think it's very important to just focus on the ideas themselves. You know, so
Yeah.
you know, if something that comes out of this whole thing is better criminal enforcement and a more lax speech and discourse culture, I think that's the best we can hope for.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, and there's a lot, boy, there's a lot of stuff in there, and a lot of our policies aren't designed to. They don't create the desired effect. How about that? And when I think about prison, I've studied prison quite a lot, and one of the things that might just work, it might just be like, hey, you have too many incursions with the law. Alcohol is a problem here. Violence is a problem. We're going to give you a 20-year break from the big world, and you can work on whatever it is. And taking, because if we take a more purposeful rehabilitative approach, we might be able to get these guys past that time when they've mellowed and seasoned into somebody better, but not expose them to the big world because, you know, I don't want to be responsible for, if I was that judge, that magistrate, and I'd let that guy out that last time and he went out and murdered somebody. I, first off, I wouldn't be that person. I wouldn't be. I couldn't look at that person and say, "Hey, you've been here a lot. Um, have a nice day." I wouldn't be able to do that, and I would. And I'm a softie. I want people to have chances, but we do need to work on how our redemption path. We do need to work on how we deal with these things, but not incarcerating people is not one of the solutions. We have to figure out how to be better at this. We have to incarcerate less people. We also have to protect ourselves because there's people that need incarcerating, and it's a wicked problem. Hey, I don't want to take any more of your time. So close up and say whatever you want to say about this. Thank you, man, for coming on the show. I appreciate it. It's great chatting with you. You make me think a lot about how we deal with these things. None of this stuff's easy, and everybody's supposed to be uncomfortable when we talk about these hard problems. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for teaching us about what you know, and then say whatever you want to say, and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me. As always, it's a pleasure to be on the show. I think this is my third time, so hopefully there'll be many more in the future.
Of course.
So I appreciate the platform, and all the best to you.
Yeah, no worries. All right, everybody. I'll see you on Monday. I'm gonna have a recorded show, but that'll go up. You guys will enjoy that. Rabbit Hole. I'll talk to you in a second to say goodbye. Everybody have a good weekend. Ciao, ciao.